Topic is security awareness training. Now, I'm going to preface this with a top finding I recently saw in a report from Forrester, which said, quote, unless you capture hearts and minds, no amount of training will work. So with that said, what have you heard enough about with regards to security awareness training, and what would you like to hear a lot more? Dan.
I've heard enough about phishing. I'm not saying it's not important. In fact, I think if you're not doing it, you're doing your program a disservice.
It seems like it eats up like 90 to 95% of the mind share of security awareness training, doesn't it?
Well, it does, because people view security awareness as some non. I gotta market this thing now. Okay, fish some people and we'll call it a day. And you can't do that, right? But it is foundational to a security program because of how successful it is. The reason why we're getting more and more sophisticated phishing emails is because it works. What I want to hear more about is the research that's been done around how people absorb information or how they change their behavior. There's entire science about this in other industries. We study it. There's been volumes of medical articles written about how children learn, right, to try to make our education system better. And so I just don't know if we've done the research. I think we have as an industry, or that we've really done a great job of sharing that widespread within the industry. I know just from having a family member, some people learn from doing, some people learn from reading, some people learn from listening. And I think we need to approach our workforce with that same perspective in mind, and answer the same question. Why are the same people clicking on those phishing emails? It might be because you're hitting them in a style of learning that just doesn't resonate with them. And it may have something to do with their learning style.
Good point. All right. I throw this to you, Drew. Same exact question. What have you heard enough about with security awareness training, which I know is one of the industries you guys are in? And what would you like to hear a lot more?
Yeah, agreed, Dan. Phishing, programs that rely on simulated phishing to change behavior, it's never going to be effective. As a former phishing simulation administrator, I can game the system. I can make something so hard that everybody's going to fall for it, and I can get a 40% click rate, or I can make it so easy. The only person that's going to click on it's going to happen by accident because their cat was walking across their keyboard, right? It's not a good judgment of whether that you are reducing risk is simulation. But I do agree it plays a role, and introducing people to concepts and different types of fish through simulated phishing programs is definitely an avenue that should be approached by all organizations, but it should be just part of the conversation. It shouldn't be the only part of the conversation. So agree with that sentiment there. More human risk management. That's kind of what we call the top level of security awareness training, learning modules, phishing, team-based training. All those things kind of fit into human risk management. I believe that it deserves an equal seat at the CISOs Knights of the Round Table.
Do me a favor, back up. What do you mean when you define human risk management? What is that?
Okay, so my belief is that when security awareness programs were first developed, 10, 15 years ago, and this is what I experienced in the military. I was in the Army for 9 years. We took the same training every year for 9 years. Cyber challenge for the listeners that are aware. It never changed. But you know what it was good at? It was good at proving that I watched it. I got the checkbox, and they can go back to the big army and says, oh, look, all these soldiers took the training. What it wasn't good at was actually reducing risk, right? I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't engaging in it. I was ignoring it and trying to get through it as fast as possible. That translated into the security awareness training industry that we see today, dominating the market. They made it really easy for IT and compliance to get the checkbox, but they didn't really focus on changing behavior. And that's why I think we need to move away from calling this security awareness training, because that's an HR tactic. That's a compliance tactic. And we need to call it human risk management, because in Dan's world, running his organization, his goal isn't just to get the checkbox. His goal is to reduce risk, to change behavior. And as a byproduct, he's going to get all the boxes checked that he needs to.
And so is part of human risk management kind of a little bit of what Dan was just saying, of learning the ways we can actually change behavior to reduce risk? I mean, I got to assume that's part of the formula, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. Utilizing existing data to understand current behavior. And if interventions are actually working by looking back at that data post-intervention. So we see data in our SIM, in our SOC. We're using it to understand if we've been breached or if we have incidents. But those are behavior. Those are events that are caused by humans. We all understand that. That's where they're coming from. So if we have an intervention point, if we're focusing on training in a way that makes sense to a user from how they like to train, whether on a team, whether through a game, whether through reading a book, if we provide that multifaceted intervention point, we can measure 3 months later to see if it actually worked by leveraging the data. And that's what I'm not hearing enough of, is how can we use that existing data to understand if the training that we're investing in and launching is actually effective.
I'm going to set you up here. I want 2, 3 maybe tips of actual types of training that you've seen behavioral change. And it doesn't need to be mammoth, but you've just seen like, when we do this, this is the kind of thing that actually changes behavior. What have you seen, Drew?
So something I've seen, we had a client of ours run one of our team-based training experience where you get 8 people into a scenario and they learn about general cybersecurity fundamentals. We had that actual client, they ran an A/B testing using a phishing simulator. And what they learned is out of the 700 people that went through that team-based training experience, they were 40% less likely to click on the same phishing simulation email than another group of 700 users that did not. So here's a group of people that are engaging in cybersecurity, that we're building a strong culture on, that are learning about what phishing is in a fictional simulation. And then we're seeing the results 3 weeks later when a majority of them are not clicking on the same phishing email that the people that didn't go through that type of experience.
And by the way, I think the example you give there is actually very good, because in that case of the phishing, it really doesn't matter ultimately what that fish is, whether it was one of the really hard ones or one of the easy ones. It's just showing that, hey, with the training, without the training, there is a marketable difference. Now, here's my big question. How long after you did the training did you test that? Because I'd be interested to know how many months down the road is that still effective?
Yeah, David, great point. I think it was about 3 to 4 weeks after the training is when they did that simulation. But again, that is something that's very hard to measure right now. And we work with teams all over the place that are trying to understand the effects of those interventions, like that team-based training, I would call an intervention. And so something we're working on is being able to provide a solution to be able to measure something 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the line by just looking at the behavior from something like a phishing simulator.
Drew, was it computer based? Was it like a Zoom type of meeting, or what was the delivery method?
When we launched Living Security, we actually built one of the first physical escape rooms built around cybersecurity for general end users. And during COVID, we actually pivoted to a completely virtual solution where 8 people join our application and they go through about a 40-minute exercise that has 8 different scenarios that relate all back to cybersecurity fundamentals like phishing, password hygiene, data loss policies, and things like that. And it's all got a really fun fictional storyline that really gets them involved. And you're learning by doing, you're learning as a team, you're learning by having fun, kind of some of those basic behavioral science principles that you brought up and some of the things that you would want to see more of.
Nice. Very cool.
I cannot stress the key to fun. I don't know why that has to always be removed from the equation, but fun, I think, really factors in well. And I mean, I know with us in our show, to try to keep our audience engaged, we try to create games and make things fun for them as well. So I'm with you on that, Drew.